I will tell you that I have watched uh, foreign and military affairs since I was 8 years old, and I have seen a lot of wars come and go in this time. And so, what I want to do today is I want to discuss the growing danger of nuclear war as NATO's fortunes in the war begin to fade. Now, 10 days ago, French President Macron told reporters that although NATO countries weren't in agreement about sending troops to fight Russia, that France was willing to do it. And he said, quote, "We'll do anything we can to prevent Russia from winning this war. Nothing should be ruled out." Now, immediately, his remarks were dismissed by the US, by Germany, by Britain, and others. But it's interesting to note that he has continued almost every couple of days since then. He has some modification of his original remarks. So this shows that this is more than just sort of an off-the-cuff thing. Now, this is a classic NATO trial balloon. First, you suggest a radical new proposal, and it's dismissed by the other nations. Then there's discussion, and it's gradually accepted by the nations one after the other. Already Estonia has said that this looks like a paradigm shift that shows that Western policymakers who make the decisions are prepared to do more. And we've seen this before. We've seen that throughout the Ukraine war, where there was tremendous debate over whether to send tanks, whether to send long-range missiles, whether to send F-16s. And in each case, the US has said, no, we're not going to do this. This is beyond what we're going to engage in. And then gradually, as the discussion sinks in and the public interest fades, then they go ahead and they do it. So this is a classic trial balloon. Now, I'll note that last night, the Ukraine war was the top item in Biden's State of the Union address. It was the thing he led off with. He compared our effort to Roosevelt's support for the Soviet Union during World War II. But he said he promised not to send US troops into battle. Now, let me tell you, whenever a US president promises not to send US troops, history tells us it's almost a promise to do just the opposite. LBJ, President Johnson, who began the buildup in the Vietnam War, promised. He said, "We will not send American boys to fight Asian wars." And when the Gulf of Tonkin event occurred, and there was allegedly an attack by North Vietnamese PT boats on a US destroyer, he said, quote, "We Americans know, although others may appear to forget, the risks of spreading conflict. We seek no wider war." Now, at the very moment that he said that, the Pentagon was abuzz preparing for a ground war in Vietnam, which eventually went on and killed 60,000 Americans. So the fact that President Biden has emphasized this is almost a warning that it is very likely to occur. Now, President Putin has reacted to this, and he warned that if French troops or if NATO troops entered the war, that it'd have tragic consequences for any countries that decide to engage in war against Russia. And he emphasized that Russia's nuclear forces are in full readiness, which they are. They have recently been modernized with the new Sarmat heavy intercontinental ballistic missile and the Burevestnik atomic-powered cruise missile. The Russian nuclear forces probably are in a greater state of readiness than the Americans right now. And President Putin said, they must understand that we also have weapons that can hit targets on their territory. So he's talking about on, New York City. He's talking about Washington, D.C., and various other places in the U.S. without saying so. And he says, quote, President Putin, quote, all this really threatens a conflict with the use of nuclear weapons and the destruction of civilization. Don't they get that? Well, I'm not sure that they do. But I want to tell you, I have watched President Putin since he was first sworn into office. And I would tell you, he is a very serious person when he warns of the risks of nuclear war. He doesn't want war. He wants to head it off. And that's what he's attempting to do by his warnings. For anyone who is not familiar with President Putin, he is a very highly intelligent individual. He has a rock steady hand. He is unemotional and he is very rational. Now, when I say unemotional, I mean he's not driven to sudden reactions by his emotions. He's very restrained, but he is determined. And he says that he intends to follow Russian nuclear doctrine, which says that if NATO threatens Russia's territorial integrity, that the nuclear weapons will be used. Now, remember, under Russian law, the Crimea and the Donbass are now a part of Russia. We may not recognize that, but when President Putin follows the Russian doctrine, he will be following Russian law, not American, not NATO, EU, or anything of that sort. So it is interesting that in addition to the statements made by Macron, we also have this strange disclosure with the German military officers discussing how they have been involved in choosing targets and planning to do a massive attack on the Kerch Bridge in Crimea. It looks suspiciously as though this was a deliberate leak to sort of establish with the people of the Western nations that, look, we've always been involved in fighting in Ukraine. This is nothing new. This is just a little bit of a bump up in our process. So understand where we are right now. Ukraine has suffered just grievous losses in this Western planned counteroffensive. Reports are 166,000 casualties. Whatever the numbers, it was an absolute bloodbath, a disaster for Ukraine. And at this point, they have expended all of their reserves. So what's happening is all along the 620-mile front with Russia, there is this, they're stretched thin. And if it breaks at some point, the Russians are likely to simply burst forward without any possibility of reinforcement. Now, the reckless actions being undertaken by the Biden administration and by other Western countries, Macron, by Scholz in Germany, are designed to prop up Ukraine at least until after the November elections, so that pro-war forces have the ability to maintain control in the United States. Now, I will point out to you that just the other day, Undersecretary of State Victoria Nuland, who originally helped to overthrow the president of Ukraine in a 2014 coup, announced that she is retiring from the Department of State as the Ukrainian, she did not say this, but as she's doing it, as the Ukrainian defeat becomes more obvious. So the writing is on the wall. Ukraine is a slaughterhouse. They're losing the war. And the time is now that NATO, if they want to do something, they're going to have to step in and do it themselves. Keep in mind that there are a tremendous number of people in all NATO countries whose lives, whose reputation, whose family wealth depends on war-connected activities. And they do not intend to let Ukraine go down. So it's an extremely dangerous time. We need to do whatever we can to resist the possibility of American and NATO troops becoming directly involved in the Ukraine war to a greater extent than they already have. Thank you.